Hello, my name is John Spangle. Thank you for turning into my YouTube channel. I got my buddy Patches here with me. He's not feeling too good tonight, and that's his sister behind me sleeping up there. We have a few animals in our house, the rescue animals. We love them so much. They're part of our family. I got one over there. If you hear her sneezing, she's got a cold. So today's video I'm making is, did the sun stand still for a day? And it's a very interesting subject that I've read about before and heard about. In the book of Joshua, chapter 10, verses 7 through 15, so Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people were with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said unto Joshua, Fear them not, for I have delivered them unto thine hand. There shall not a man of them stand before thee. Joshua therefore came out unto them suddenly, and went up from Gilgal all night. And the Lord discomforted them before Israel, and slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and chased them along the way that goeth up to Beth-horon, and smote them to Azekah and unto Makkedah. Sorry for butchering these words. And it came to pass, as they fled from before Israel, and were in the going down to Beth-horon, that the Lord cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died. They were more which died with the hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. They spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites. These are giants. There was 36 giant races throughout the promised land. That's the reason why God had the Israeli people come through there and kill everybody, because their DNA was tainted. Things I've said in previous videos. Before the children of Israel, and he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand thou still upon Gideon, and thou, moon, in the valley of Ajalon. This is Joshua saying that to God. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hasted not to go down about a whole day. And there was no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man before it fought for Israel. And Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, unto the camp of Gilgal. Now, in this video I'm talking about, I'll be referring to two books, the book of Jasher, and later on, Antiquities of the Jews by Flavius Josephus. There's three books that were talked about in the Bible that were used for reference. Those two books plus the book of Enoch. They were not meant to be in the Bible. A lot of people teach these things were meant to be in the Bible. They were not. They were references outside the Bible that were used. Now, according to the book of Jasher, chapter 88, verses 55 through 65, and when Adonizek, and I'm sorry for butchering his name, king of Jerusalem, heard all that the children of Israel had done to Jericho and to Ai, he sent to Hoham, king of Hebron, and Piram, king of Jarmuth, and to Japha, king of Lachish, and Deber, king of Eglon, saying, Come up unto me, and help me, that we may smite the children of Israel and the inhabitants of the Gibeon, who have made peace with the children of Israel. These were all the Amorite people. They were all giants. All these kings were people of giants, mixed DNA. And they gathered themselves together, and the 5 kings of the Amorites went up with all their camps, a mighty people, numerous as the sand of the sea of the shore, of the seashore. And all these kings came and encamped before Gibeon, and they began to fight against the inhabitants of Gibeon. And all the men of Gibeon sent to Joshua, saying, Come up quickly to us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites have gathered together to fight against us. And Joshua and all the fighting people went up from Gilgal, and Joshua came suddenly to them and smote these 5 kings with a great slaughter. And the Lord confounded them before the children of Israel, who smote them with a terrible slaughter in Gibeon, and pursued them along the way that goes up to Beth-horon unto Makkedah, and they fled from before the children of Israel. And whilst they were fleeing, the Lord sent upon them hailstones from heaven, and more of them died by the hailstones than by the slaughter of the children of Israel. The children of Israel pursued them, they still smote them in the road, going on and smiting them. And when they were smiting, the day was declining toward evening, and Joshua said in the sight of all the people, Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon, until the nation shall have revenged itself upon its enemies. And the Lord hearkened to the voice of Joshua, and the sun stood still in the midst of the heavens, and it stood still 6:30 moments. And the moon also stood still, and hastened not to go down a whole day. And there was no day like that, before it or after it, that the Lord hearkened to the voice of man, for the Lord fought for Israel. So as I said, this is a reference to the Bible that backs up Joshua's story. And the reason for that is they were fighting the enemy, but they were still surrounded. And Joshua knew the night was coming on, and if the night happened, the tide of battle could easily have been reversed. Even though God had killed out a lot of them, they could turn around and wiped out Joshua's people. So God did what he did. According to the Bible Science Newsletter, Daily Reading Magazine, in May of 1978, it is reported by historians that records of the Chinese during the reign of Emperor Yeo, who lived at the same time as Joshua, report a long day. Also, Herodotus, a Greek historian, wrote on account of a long day appears in the records of Egyptian priests. These priests in the temples had copies of records saying that this Diaz read that was a recorded long day. Others cite records of Mexicans of the sun standing still for an entire day in a year denoted as 7 rabbits, which is the same year in which Joshua defeated the Philistines and conquered Palestine. Astronomers today. It is common knowledge among astronomers that one full day is missing in our astronomical calculations, and that Professor Pickering of the Harvard Observatory traced it back to the time of Joshua. Maunder of Greenwich and Totten of Yale are then supposed to have taken it right back to the time of Joshua, practically to the year and day. Then Totten added to this the 10% of Ahaz dial to find out the full day. Reason being, and I'll go into explain this, I'm about to go into Kings. When I talk about the sun being back, there's 2 accounts in the Bible mixing together makes a full day, and I'll explain that later in the summary I have here from a statement from some people from NASA. But there's 2 times that the time was changed by God for a purpose. 2 Kings 20 chapter verses 8 through 11. And Hezekiah said unto Isaiah, What shall be the sign that the Lord shall heal men, and that I shall go up into the house of the Lord the 3rd day? And Isaiah said, This sign shall thou have of the Lord, that the Lord will do the thing that he hath spoken. Shall the shadow go forward 10 degrees, or go back 10 degrees? And Hezekiah answered, It is a light thing for the shadow to go down 10 degrees. Nay, but let the shadow return backwards 10 degrees. And Isaiah the prophet cried unto the Lord, and he brought the shadow 10 degrees backward, by which it had gone down in the dial of Ahaz. Now, there is some talk about this dial of Ahaz. Could be a sundial, but also the king of Ahaz, they had a way of recording time, kind of like a sundial, but it was a staircase. So the sun coming down, sun going back up, backwards. So it could be either way, because that's what they used in front of the temple. They had a staircase recording the time of day. So we put in here a quick equation. Obviously, I copied it because I'm not good at math. If daylight is 12 hours, then 180 degrees equals to 12 hours. This is explaining the time of how much would it be for 2 Kings of this time of doing the 180 degrees coming back. And I'll explain that later in just a minute. 12 hours by 60 minutes, 12 hours times 60 minutes per hour equals 720 minutes. 720 minutes divided by 180 degrees, which means that by going backwards 180 degrees, it's 4 minutes per degree. 10 degrees that God moved the shadow backwards times 4 minutes per degree means 40 minutes. So he made time go back 40 minutes. This is important. Antiquities of the Jews, written by Flavius Josephus, stated the following. Joshua made haste with his whole army to assist them in marching day and night. And I just a quick note, I'm no infantry sergeant. I served in the Air Force 8 years, and I served in the infantry, Army National Guard for 13 years. I always talk about early man being stronger than modern man, and this is a prime example. You have to realize back in these battles, and I do believe this, there's not exaggerations. There's mixed DNA, and I explained that in other videos. Some of these people were giants. Like the Canaanites were so large, the Israelites were considered grasshoppers in their sight. And these people were huge. And they would march, infantry, they would walk all day, all night, and then battle sun up to sundown. A lot of these battles in the Old Testament are sun up to sundown. Depends on your daylight as Joshua needed more time. My point is, they didn't travel. Majority of them traveled by foot. So, I mean, I've had soldiers, we go out and do a 6-mile road march, and if they're not prepared for it, it's a kick in the butt. And I've had young men come out there and be no problem, they can do it longer. But that's my point. You know, you go to Ranger School, you're looking at a few hours road march. I have to research it back again. It's been a while. My memory's not that good. You know, you're talking 12 hours or so road marches. But even that, you're not talking about marching all day and all night and fighting hours in the hand-to-hand combat. So these men, give understanding, these men were stronger than men today. And I'm not degrading men today. I served in the military, and I have respect for everybody in the military. I have health issues the last few years. That's why I retired at 51. But, you know, my bodies are limited to what we do. But back then, they were stronger. And a lot of times we kind of put things out there saying, you know, they were better now than modern man is better than early man. And actually, it's not true. So they marched all day and night. In the morning, fell upon the enemies as they were going up to the siege. And when he had discomfited them, disrupted their plans on siege, they went there and kicked their butt. He followed them and pursued them down the descent of the hills. The place is called Beth-horon, where he also understood that God assisted him when he declared by the thunder and thunderbolts, and also by the falling of hail larger than usual. Moreover, it happened that the day was lengthened, that the night not come too soon and be an obstruction to the zeal of the Hebrews in pursuing their enemies. Insomuch that Joshua took the kings who were hidden in a certain cave of Makkedah and put them to death. Now that the day was length ended at this time, it was longer than ordinary, is expressed in the books laid up in the temple. So this is the last part. This is the last part, real quick, of what I'm going to read. The story that I found is very interesting. I really love. God shows us many things. And a lot of times people's like, well, the Bible's not true or God's not true. They're not researching. And people tell me, well, it contradicts it. No, it doesn't. You can look at it. You know, I had conversations with someone about science. The science disproves. That's good. My back's messed up. My arm goes numb a lot. Science disapproves the Bible. Totally disagree with that. Science proves the Bible. And a lot of your early scientists believed in God. But we're not taught that because we're taught by a secular world. Basically, you're being taught by Satan. We all have been. Mr. Hill related a story that in regard to the missing day, about the missing day, the article was printed in the Yellville, Arkansas Mountain Echo in March 26, 1970. I love this article. Now, remember, this article was disputed by an author at the Washington Post. Tried to dispute this man, discredit him, and later Mr. Hill was able to prove what he said was true. Do you know that, and this is the article, do you know that the space program is busy proving what has been called myth in the Bible is true? Mr. Harold Hill, president of the Curtiss Engine Company in Baltimore, Maryland, and a consultant in the space program, relayed the following development. I think one of the most amazing things that God has for us today happened recently to our astronauts checking the position of sun, moon, and planets out in space, where they would be 100,000 years from now. We have to know this so we don't send a satellite up and have it bump into something later on in its orbits. We have to lay out the orbit in terms of the life of the satellite, where the planets will be, so the whole thing will not bog down. They ran the computer measurement back and forth over centuries, and it came to a halt. The computer stopped and put up a red signal, which meant that there was something wrong, either into the info fed into the computer or the results as computer to the standards. They called in the service department to check it out, and they stated, "It's perfect." The IBM head of operations said, "What's wrong?" "Well, we have found that there is a day missing in space and elapsed time." They scratched their heads and tore their hair. There was no answer. One religious fellow in the team said, "You know, one time I was in Sunday school, they talked about the sun standing still." They didn't believe him, but they didn't have any other answer, so they said, "Show us." So he went and got a Bible, and went back to the book of Joshua, where they found a pretty ridiculous statement by anyone who has common sense. There they found the Lord saying to Joshua, "Fear them not, I have delivered them into your hand. There shall not a man of them stand before thee." Joshua was concerned because he was surrounded by the enemy, and if darkness fell, they would overpower him. So Joshua asked the Lord to make the sun stand still. That's right. The sun stood still, and the moon stayed, and they hastened not to go down a whole day. They read the Bible, and there is said about approximately a day, or it's not quite a full day. These little words in the Bible are important, but they were still in trouble because if you cannot count 40 minutes, you'll be in big trouble 1,000 years from now. 40 minutes had to be found because it can be multiplied many times over in orbits. In other words, when the sun stood still for Joshua, it wasn't quite a full, it was 40 minutes short of a full day. Well, this religious fellow also remembered somewhere in the Bible it said the sun went backwards. The spaceman told him he was out of his mind, but they got out the book and they read these words in 2 Kings 20th chapter, where I read to you just recently. Hezekiah, on his deathbed, was visited by the prophet Isaiah, who told him that he was going to die. Hezekiah did not believe him and asked for a sign as proof. Isaiah said, "Do you want the sun to go ahead 10 degrees? Hezekiah said, "It's nothing for the sun to go ahead 10 degrees, but let the shadow return backwards 10 degrees. Isaiah spoke to the Lord, and the Lord brought the shadow 10 degrees backward. 10 degrees is exactly 40 minutes. 23 hours and 20 minutes with Joshua plus the 40 minutes in 2 Kings make the missing day in the universe. Isn't that amazing? Our God is rubbing their noses in his truth." So many times you hear stories about this. A lot of times man tries to be so smart and things happen and there's proof if you really look for it. God says if you seek him, you will find him. There's a lot of proof that God is real and the Bible's real. Every time I hear people talk about this contradicts something, or it's just because they're not putting the time in to study, because they're not looking for God. They got their viewpoints, they live by their heart, but you have to be careful with the heart because that's the flesh. The body is the soul, the mind is the soul, but also his mind is the battlefield. You get thoughts in your head, it comes from two things. It comes from God and it comes from Satan. As they had the angel on one side and devil on the other talking to each other, that actually is based on truth. You get things, you choose. Jesus Christ, God loved us so much that he came as flesh, as Jesus Christ. He suffered one of the worst deaths known to man, suffered everything to be that sacrifice for us because we're not good enough to go to heaven. We have to, Christ had to be that sacrifice. And he loved us so much. And that's how we go to heaven, not by man. And our time is short. And soon, with everything happening in this world, I look forward to the rapture of the church. Thank you very much.